Action figure prototypes certainly add an intriguing layer of depth in the world of toy collecting, and the existence of pre-production figures have certainly created something of a niche market among collector circles. While the idea behind a prototype is to provide final physical details and proportions shortly ahead of the tooling and manufacturing process, some prototypes are modified before the figures get made. Still, some prototypes get to the final pre-production steps, but a change in business direction results in the items never getting to its intended market, thus resulting in a concept never hitting full implementation and creation. It is this latter example that will be discussed today in the case of an unreleased would-be Action Force figure by the name of Bombardier. Some of the images and much of the information in this video are sourced from the 2021 hardcover book titled Total Action Force: The Battle Years, authored by Brian Hickey, Patty Lennon, and David McDonald. Further information is taken from direct conversations with Palitoy historians Ron Connor and David Tree, who graciously shared first-hand experiences regarding their contributions in the discovery of this figure. Further information regarding unproduced Action Force figures has been cross-referenced with the Blood for the Baron website, as well as a 2019 video collaboration between Analog Toys and the Full Force podcast that also included information from the legendary Palitoy chief designer Bob Breakin. Let's begin. Hi everyone, this is Ken with Toy Connections. If you enjoyed this video and would like to be notified of my future content, please be sure to hit subscribe. Also, if you're able to help the channel grow, head over to my Patreon site and consider a monthly pledge where you'll be able to unlock exclusive content and other benefits. That's patreon.com/toyconnections. The link is in the description below, as is the list of names for this channel's existing Patreon supporters. While the original Palitoy Action Force was widely accepted as the European equivalent of G.I. Joe, the early years of the brand were quite different. The foundation of Action Force was rooted in the 4 hero sub-teams, namely the Z-Force for land battles, the Q-Force for marine-based missions, Space Force for outer planetary expeditions, and the SAS for special operations. All of these sub-teams were united against a common villain known as the Red Shadows, led by Baron Ironblood and his ruthless second-in-command, the Black Major. And while Palitoy as a company decided that 4 hero sub-teams and 1 enemy team were what the action figure market could handle in those early years, evidence later came to light of a planned 5th sub-team that had been largely developed but did not make it to market before Palitoy's design department was discontinued in 1984. This team would have been known as Action Force's Special Weapons Force. Alas, the sub-team concept as a whole was discontinued, and Action Force carried on in Europe primarily as re-released O-ring-based G.I. Joe product. Flash forward to the United States in 1999, when collector Ron Connor purchased some figures at a store called Whizbang Comics in Florida, and a mysterious gray, yellow, and red recolor of the G.I. Joe character known as Flash was among the items in said purchase. At the time, nothing was really known about this enigmatic figure. Determined in his pursuit for information, Ron created a contest on his website to publicly source information, and even went as far as to ask former Hasbro product manager Kirk Bazigian about the figure. But as it was not a domestically planned figure, it was beyond the scope of Kirk's work during his prior days at Hasbro. So for a long time, it was believed Ron Connor's quest to discover the origins of this mystery figure would go unfulfilled. However, about a decade later, and unbeknownst to Ron, David Tree, a fellow Action Force collector halfway across the globe, as part of an unrelated venture, was granted special access to the archive section of the V&A Museum of Childhood in Bethnal Green in the United Kingdom, where a never-before-seen vintage toy collection had been donated. After several visits and digging through boxes of early production parts and Palitoy paperwork, David would be the first to find some never-before-seen Action Force prototypes. These figures were all labeled with tags identifying them indeed as part of a special weapons subgrouping. On his first visit, he discovered a figure labeled as Boffin, who bears a striking resemblance to Palitoy chief designer Bob Breakin himself. Then on a return trip, he found other figures that bore the names Fixer, Sniper, and Lightning, all of whom were done in the 5 POA style akin to the early Action Force figures. However, a 5th figure was found among this subgrouping, this one designed in the O-ring G.I. Joe style, and was the same color scheme to the figure that Ron Connor had found previously. This figure was labeled as Bombardier. David shared his story with the Blood for the Baron website, who put the 2 like-minded collectors in contact, and thus the lengthy 10-year journey to uncovering one of toy history's great mysteries was solved. And now we know, and since knowing is half the battle, Ron, Connor owned one prototype of Bombardier in the swivel arm style, while the V&A Museum owned the other sample, which was a straight arm version. And if you're the type who can relate to two collectors forming a bond, Ron and David are now forever linked due to the story of Bombardier's pre-production origin. When asked about his Palitoy design history, Bob Breakin indeed confirmed how close the Special Weapons Force was to making it to market, and believes that if the sub-team concept had been continued, we likely would have seen these on store shelves in Europe. David Tree then paid a visit to Bob Breakin, and while going through some old files, they later provided some old photographs of the sub-teams, and one of the photos showed an alternate colorway that was done for the Special Weapons Force, which would have been presented as part of a planned toy catalog. Most notably, the Bombardier figure was now painted in a largely light blue color scheme, with white gloves and boots. Which of these two colorways would have made it to market, no one can say for sure. Another cool note about the original planned release, if he had ever been in the vintage line, would be promotional shots suggest that Bombardier would have been released with a recolor of the previous SAS Panther, which itself was a recolored G.I. Joe Vamp Jeep. And while the aforementioned prototypes are the only publicly known ones that officially came from Palitoy's design department and pre-production process, let's flash forward a few years later when the short-lived company Red Laser's Army did produce a short run of factory custom bootlegs to the collector market, which are the figures that I have in my possession here. I have previously covered a run of Red Laser figures with the character based on the green bicycle riding Snake Eyes, who was dubbed by fellow fans as Kickstart, so please check out that video if you have a few minutes to spare. So since the only known prototypes exist either in Ron Connor's collection or the V&A Museum, these Red Laser versions cannot and will never be passed off as original. Also of note is that these factory customs are of a lower quality of ABS plastic compared to other figures that I own, and I've noticed that the antenna piece on the rifle is kind of brittle. I do enjoy having both of these in my collection due to what they symbolize as unofficial recreations of prototypes from toy history, and having both colors is cool not only because of the alternate colorway photograph shown earlier, but also because it was later discovered that the prototype in the V&A Museum had actually been repainted from a light blue to a gray color scheme. All the while, Ron Connor's version is of injected gray plastic. Also, even before the existence of the Red Laser factory customs, there was a modern release of Bombardier, and as fans became more influential in the G.I. Joe community, a 2014 subscription service figure from the G.I. Joe Collectors Club was made of Bombardier as part of the modern 4-inch line. The figure was given the official file card name of Connor D. Tree to honor both Ron Connor and David Tree's contributions to the history of unearthing this figure. Bombardier's file card also lists him as an electronics and electrical engineer who excelled in weapons development. He was later captured by the Red Shadows and witnessed the death of several family members before being rescued by Action Force and recruited as part of their Special Weapons Force. It should be known that David Tree played an influential part in the development of this file card. So with all that history considered, I just want to say that having these unofficial derivatives of the legendary prototypes does give the everyman, average Joe type of toy collector like myself some semblance of satisfaction, such that looking at these reminds me of an important discovery in toy history. As a collector based out of Canada, I grew up with G.I. Joe and did not come to learn of Action Force, much less its amazing sub-teams and unique characters, until much later. So as I learn about toy history and the lore surrounding it, I am all too pleased to share this with you today. And I can only hope that this video does some justice to those individuals who either contributed to the history of Action Force or were part of the discovery process of this figure, as well as fellow fans and toy historians who have spent years spreading information to preserve the honor and history of this great toy line. In some small way, this is my thank you to all of them. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, leave me a Yo Joe or a full force battle cry in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel if you already haven't, press that like button, and share this video with your fellow collectors. Otherwise, I'll see you again soon with some more of my favorite toys. Take care.